Alright, welcome back. Now I'm tackling what most people talk about as the golden age of Star Wars, or the best Star Wars typically, which is the original trilogy, starting with Episode 4, A New Hope. I don't really have too much to talk about on this movie, besides the writing, because you saw that in the previous videos where I was talking about Rogue One, where the characters just fell flat and they didn't really have that much substance to them as far as Jen and Cassian, the leads of those movies. But this one, there was a lot of depth to like Luke and Han and Leia. Leia wasn't that typical damsel in distress. She was somebody that might have been in distress because she was captured, but she wasn't somebody that couldn't hold her own and couldn't fight for herself. You see her take lead like the moment that she's rescued and going straight forward from there. Luke was kind of reluctant. He was that kind of guy that wanted to stay home to help his family, even though he didn't really necessarily want to. He wanted to be in the academy and fighting and all this stuff, but his family needed him and he stayed home. Han, for himself, was just exactly that. He was out for himself. He wasn't looking into getting into the fight. He was just wanting to get his reward and get gone kind of thing. He was ruggish. He was all that good stuff that you want out of a character. You want substance from your characters as from a writing standpoint. So speaking from a writing standpoint, the opening for me was probably the best way to do these movies, which is establish the antagonist, establish the villain. I love it when a movie will rather establish the antagonist rather than the protagonist first off, because usually whenever you start a story, you're either setting up the story of what's been going on, or you're setting up one of your characters, and usually it's the protagonist in some or most cases. But for me, I like it when you start on the bad side. I don't know what that says about me, but that's what it is. Another thing is, this is typically looked at as the blueprint of the hero's journey, which this is, or it's upside down, but this is Joseph Campbell's A Hero's Journey, where it sets up like the timestamps for every moment. Usually within the first 10 minutes of a movie, you want to establish the ordinary world, which for this movie, it was the opening from Vader attacking and capturing Leia, to her putting it in the droids, C-3PO and R2, and then R2 and C-3PO becoming possessions of Luke, and then setting up his character after they capture him. The call to adventure, which is the next point, usually right after 10 minutes. This movie goes a little bit longer than 10 minutes. I think it was roughly about 15 to 16 minutes before you got the call to adventure, which is, "Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope," whenever Luke finally sees that. Then you have the refusal of the call from then to page 30, which is Luke was wanting to hear the rest of the message. R2 didn't want to give it to him because he was trying to give it just to Obi-Wan himself, and then he wasn't trying to be like that loyal companion to Luke yet because he doesn't really know him that much or that well. So then you get all that stuff, and then you get Luke being told about the Force from Obi-Wan, and then Luke was like, "I want to be fighting. I don't like the Empire, but I want to fight. But that's not my time yet. It's not. I can't do it. I don't have time for that right now." And then he was refusing to go and fight, even though that's what he was really wanting. That's where that character flaw of being loyal too much to his family came into play. And then he goes. Then you get at page 30, or usually minute 30 of the movie, where it's the crossing the first threshold, or what is also known as the point of no return. And this movie is when Aunt Beru and Uncle Owen were just murked and killed and burned alive pretty much by the stormtroopers. And then right after that, he's like, "I want to go and learn the ways of the Force," and then he goes to that point of no return where they're getting out and going to find test allies and enemies, also known as resistance and struggle, rising action and obstacles, belly of the whale, that type of stuff. Which and this is whenever they finally meet Han and Chewie, that they're trying to get off of Tatooine and Mos Eisley. You see all that stuff there. The midpoint climax, the Act 2 climax, if you will, is when Alderaan gets destroyed. That is the highest point of that arc, of that. Typically in a 120 minute movie is the 60 minutes between 30 and 90 minutes. That's the highest point of tension in that moment, or in that story, even though it's still building. Then you get the approaching the innermost cave, or what's also known as challenge and temptations. The bad guys close in, stuff, rising action, obstacles, stuff like that. That is, they're getting to the Death Star, and they're on the Death Star. And once they learn about the tractor beam, now they're in the belly of, or they're actually in that belly of the whale, even though that was beforehand. But I'll tell you, you can move it around as far as when moments happen. You can sometimes have a couple of things that repeat themselves as far as arc and structure. And then you get the innermost cave, also known as the Dark Night of the Soul, the plot, the Act 2 climax, stuff like that. The death of an ego, the ordeal, the crisis, and that to me was always the Vader and Obi-Wan lightsaber duel between them. And then when Obi-Wan gives himself up and becomes a part of the living force, and then after that, Act 2 is now closed. We're into the final 30 minutes, the Act 3, and the downward. Or you get a little bit more because you get that final push, which is when they're looking at the Death Star plans, coming up with the plan, and then seizing the sword, the climax, the transformation, the finale, stuff like that. The final incident is the Battle of Yavin, or the Death Star, when destroying the Death Star, and then you get Return with the Elixir, or also known as Rapidly Falling Action, the Road Back, the Denouncement, the New Life, the stuff like pretty much setting up where life is now for these characters, which is when you get them landing back on Yavin, and they're going through all their, the celebrations. They destroyed the Death Star. Vader is flying away, knowing that he hasn't been beaten, even though Moff Tarkin was, which I loved Peter Cushing's portrayal of Moff Tarkin, because he just did it so masterfully, and he was just so intimidating, and you could see that in Carrie Fisher's performance, and she was truly intimidated just by him and the way he was acting and portraying that character. Will I say that this is the best movie of the Star Wars movies? Probably not, because even though blueprint wise and structurally wise, it is probably the most well written of the movies. There's just, I just can't say that this is the one that I find the most compelling to watch all the time. I can't say that I will sit down and always watch this movie like, oh, let me get some popcorn and watch A New Hope. I don't know what it is. It's just there's something off about it. I don't know if it's just the visuals, which if you really are into visual effects and learning how people do visual effects, don't get paid. I have no correlation with this channel, but look into Corridor Crew. They tell you kind of how they do some stuff. Like in this movie, you see how when Obi-Wan was working on the reactor to get the tractor beam down, you see that most of it is just painted, and just that part that he is on is the actual set that he's working with. He's only like 3 feet above the ground, stuff like that. They go into that more heavy than I can, because I don't have that knowledge. So if you're into that type of stuff, look into them. They also have a ton of other stuff of, looking into stunt choreography, visual effects, and all that good stuff. But back to that shameless plug of something I'm not affiliated with, but I enjoy their videos. It's just this movie I can't explain it for me. It just doesn't do it as well as I would like it to. I'm struggling to say that I hate this movie, because I don't. There's nothing really that jumps out at me as like, I wish they could have did this differently. The only thing I could say is the fact that George Lucas went back in and edited it and had all of those extra, like, stormtroopers riding on top of those beasts, the movement of Jabba, stuff like that. I didn't really like that stuff, but that's just me personally. George Lucas said this is the movie I really wanted to make back in '77, but the technology just wasn't there yet. So I went back and I made them the way I wanted them to make, and I can't fault him for that. This is his story, this is his baby, he has every right to do that. I just kind of liked it the way it was, though. As a viewer, it just didn't, it was subtle. Like, everything wasn't too big, it wasn't too flashy, even though it kind of was at the same time. But now with the new edits, it's just kind of boggled down, and it kind of hurts the story for me. I liked it being just, I like this small business type aspect of making this film, and then now that he's a corporation himself, it's just that. And one last thing before I close out this video, just to kind of touch on the sequel trilogy a bit. Everybody called Rey a Mary Sue, and then people were going back and forth on that, and then somebody brought up Luke being a Mary Sue because he didn't have any training. But you do see him have training in this movie, where he's, learning how to use the lightsaber from Obi-Wan when Alderaan is destroyed. He learns how to kind of get in touch with it. And I'm pretty sure Obi-Wan was kind of helping him out through the Force, using his Force power to kind of help him, I'm guessing. Again, not confirmed. And then, even on the trench run at the end of the Battle of Yavin, you have Obi-Wan talking to him, just guiding him, helping him out. He wasn't alone. He wasn't doing it by himself. And then I'll also touch on later, whenever I get to the sequels, why Rey technically isn't a Mary Sue with what The Rise of Skywalker has kind of put out there for us to consume as far as her character. So, if you like this review, even though it really wasn't a review, it's kind of more just telling the story arc and how it was written, and why it is such a well-written film, a well-wrote film, I guess is the proper grammar for it. But I enjoyed the movie. It's a fun movie to watch, even though it's not my top movie to watch all the time. Usually that's Revenge of the Sith, but that's just me. You're kind of noticing that throughout these videos I'm kind of saying the same things, and that's what Star Wars is. Every movie is the same. That's another journey that I'm trying to take you on through these videos, is every movie is a Star Wars movie, whether it's done good or done poorly, and a lot of fans want to come out and say certain movies aren't Star Wars because it didn't fit their viewpoint on it. So I'm digging deeper into the writing for those certain type of people that don't necessarily see it the way that it should be seen, as far as from a writing standpoint and the character development and everything like that. So I will be trying to come out with another video for my Empire Strikes Back review and touching on that and here today, because I'm trying to get through this entire trilogy today and then moving on to the next one. So I do hope that you come back for those videos, and I will do a recap after I do Return of the Jedi, or what it's originally called Revenge of the Jedi, before he changed it a couple months, or like a month before actually releasing that movie. So I'm hoping that even though that this video was kind of a recap of what made this movie so good, or technically why it is labeled the blueprint, I do hope that you are starting to see that even though these videos are getting repetitive about what I am covering, that they are all Star Wars still, and they all do have like kind of the same flaws and kind of the same strengths. So I would like it if you guys would just stop saying that, oh, I didn't like this movie because it doesn't line up with what Star Wars is in my eyes, because obviously I'm trying to lay it out that it is. It's the exact same movie. It's the exact same over and over and over again movie, just with different characters and different plans and different things going on. So I do hope that you return for my next couple videos today, and I'll see you in a few hours.